Welcome everyone to the salon, newcomers, and there's lots of newcomers tonight, so hi, here to see Jill and Kate, I am sure. So welcome to all the newcomers and our salonistas. Thank you for being here. I am Marty, the founder and director of the salon, and in my day job I am an academic writer working in compassion, mainly with nursing and medical students. It's so great to see you all, so please grab something to drink, relax and enjoy the evening ahead. I'm just going to tell you some salon news and some practicalities for this evening. Your microphones are muted so we can concentrate and focus on Jill and Kate, but please put your cameras on so we can see your lovely faces. Please feel free to say hello to us in the chat, but then wait until the end of the conversation to write again, as we don't want to distract our chatters. And Holly will provide any links that might be of interest in the chat. And there'll be opportunity to make comments and questions at the end. The salon, as Holly said, is also recorded, so please turn your camera off if you don't want to be filmed. So the salon, for those who are new this evening, is a compassion initiative whose purpose is to provide a home and community around new and established authors and poets whose work relates to compassion and well-being. It is a place for people to connect, inspire and support using books and poems to consider various aspects of human existence in our increasingly fragmented and challenging global community. You can find further details on our website, www.compassionsalon.co.uk, and on social media, WhatsApp, not WhatsApp, I've forgotten all the social media, Twitter, Instagram, all those speaking places, Facebook. And if you like our Eventbrite space, you'll be alerted to future events. Our next salon is occurring within the Edinburgh Wellbeing Festival on the 8th of May in the Assembly Rooms in Edinburgh, when I'm hosting Paul Gilbert from Compassion Mind Foundation in conversation, and there will be another online salon towards the end of May, and all details are provided on the website shortly. There are also 5 free pairs of tickets for the Edinburgh Wellbeing Festival that they're given to us. So Holly will promote that competition from tomorrow on social media, which I won't try and remember again. As always, we would like to thank the Royal Society of Arts Scotland, with whom we collaborate with on 4 joint salons a year and provide us with our online Zoom home where we are now, and also the University of Edinburgh chaplaincy, in particular Reverend Dr. Harriet Harris, who can't be with us this evening. So to tonight's salon, this evening with Jill and Kate, we're going to explore the importance of compassion when coming to terms with a relative or friend being diagnosed with a life-limiting illness. How do we find the way to support our loved ones, and how do we make time to show compassion to ourselves? Please note that the salon will include frank discussions of death and dying, so please keep yourselves well and take time out if you need to. I'd also like at this point to mark the death of our dear friend and salonista and first author at the salon, Dr. Mary Gillis, who wrote Well, A Doctor's Journey Through Fear and Freedom. Mary was a remarkable woman, and we will mark her passing later in the year. I just want to read something that I think is relevant that Jill has quoted in her book whilst thinking about Mary in tonight's salon. Old friends pass away, new friends appear. It's just like the days. An old day passes, a new day arrives. The important thing is to make it meaningful, a meaningful friend or a meaningful day, the Dalai Lama. So, to Jill and Kate. Jill is a self-employed carer in her community and a carer support worker at Hospice of the Good Shepherd in Chester, where I did my nurse training, incidentally. Compassion is part of her work on a daily basis, supporting unpaid carers as they care for their loved ones, helping them identify how they make use of self-compassion in their daily lives and using self-compassion as part of her own routine. Writing from her personal experiences, volunteering in a community, and from her paid work, Jill self-published a book, easy-to-read book, in 2017, Moments of Meaning, Living Life Whilst Facing Death. It is aimed to provide support and useful information to those who for the first time have recently discovered their loved one has been diagnosed with a life-limiting illness. And you can get Jill's book on Amazon, and we're trying to get it over to our bookstore if we can. And there is more information about Jill on Jill's website, www.jillcox.co.uk, and I'm sure Holly's writing that in the chat. And Kate. Kate is a mindfulness and self-compassion teacher, accredited counsellor, supervisor, researcher and lecturer. She has extensive experience working in the hospice movement as a counsellor supporting adult patients and bereaved family members, including children and young people. She has been a carer several times in her personal life and is currently a carer of her adult child who lives with a chronic illness. For her PhD, she researched a brief self-compassion training for carers of individuals with life-limiting and terminal illness, and her website is www.katediggory.com. Each salon begins with a poem. So before handing you over to Jill and Kate, this is chosen by Jill, Kind Hearts, a poem by Alice Carey, also attributed to John Ruskin. Kind hearts are the gardens, kind thoughts are the roots, kind words are the blossoms, kind deeds are the fruits. Short and sweet. Thank you, Jill. Thank you, Kate. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Marty. Well, I don't know about Jill, but you know, my heart is kind of whoa going here. So this is so exciting, and we are so grateful, Marty, to you for inviting Jill and me to participate tonight. It's well, I think it's such an honour, and it's such a pleasure to be here, to be with everyone who's here online. And also, I am particularly grateful to be able to honour my dear friend Jill, who her authenticity and her passion for caring and being with people at the end of life just shines through in all her work. And it's just wonderful to be able to celebrate a bit of all that she is and what she does. Jill and I are both in caring roles. This topic is emotive. We might get emotional, and that's okay. Why not? And we might just bring a bit of self-compassion to ourselves if that happens. But that's okay. Tears flow. This is difficult stuff. And I'd just like to emphasize what Marty said. Please take care of yourself if what we talk about is too close to home. Walk away, make yourself a cup of tea, take care of yourself. You can always watch this another time. So that is the first kind of lesson in self-compassion, taking care of yourself. So Jill, we go back a long time. We've met first in the hospice movement when Jill was a befriender where I was working. And our paths have crossed over the years. I supervised Jill, supporting her in her role. But I'm going to ask you, and it was such a privilege to be working with you when you started to write Moments of Meaning. What motivated you? Why did you write the book?
Well, as you know, Kate, I've had quite a few experiences, personal experiences in my own life. And I know that Christine's with us tonight, and it's lovely to see Christine. My first was when my dad died, and that was in 2007. And I was 40, and that was the first time I'd had an experience of somebody close to me dying. I knew absolutely nothing. I was a complete novice. And then only 2 years later, my dad-in-law died. And then 2 years after that, my mother-in-law died. So in just under 5 years, I'd had 3 really close relatives die. And each time I learned so much. And each time I thought, I wish I'd have known this last time. I wish I'd have known this last time. So I wanted to pull together all the knowledge that I'd gained from being a carer supporting family relatives, and then with my volunteering experience and my paid work, I wanted to just pull it together in a simple format that meant that people could pick it up, put it down, refer back to it, read it. And I know one of my friends said that she read it in an afternoon. And she needed to, because she'd suddenly found out that her dad-in-law was poorly and had terminal cancer. And she just wanted to give herself the best opportunity to have that information at her fingertips. So that was why I wrote it.
And I really want to kind of echo that sense of it being a really practical, hands-on book, because I picked it up again to have a look at, and there's just short chapters with little nuggets to make you think and ask the right questions, and to help you kind of reflect on certain kind of key aspects that, like you, I wish I'd had it, Jill, when I was caring for my dad, my mum. Just some really, really valuable points, but not it's not too heavy for those of you out there who are looking for kind of a guide through some of this caring journey. It can be just little relevant nuggets to pick up and to help you, I think. So we're here in a compassion salon, Jill. Where did compassion first enter your life? When did you kind of become aware of compassion?
Well, I first did mindfulness training with a dear friend, Jan, who unfortunately died last year. She was such a wonderful woman, and she took me through the 8-week program of being mindful. And for me, you then went on a journey with self-compassion yourself, didn't you, Kate? And so you were doing meditation evenings that included self-compassion. So that was where I first came across it. It's that idea that in caring, you can be compassionate for others, but actually it's just as important, if not more so, to be compassionate to yourself. Because let's face it, when we're caring for somebody we love, it's not an easy thing to do. And it's all jumbled up with our emotions, our past with them, our current relationships, our past relationships, things that have happened in our lives together, and worries about the future. It's just such a mix of what's going on, that I think having that sense of a little voice in your head that says, how am I doing in this? Because very often in caring, we lose ourselves so much in what the other person needs that we forget about what's important to us. And particularly if you've been caring for any length of time, you know, you sort of lose yourself in the day-to-day of what's needed for that individual. And sometimes we actually forget who we are and what we need. So that to me is the crux of self-compassion.
And that's kind of really interesting, because it was really borne out in my research. So I was looking at carers and self-compassion, and offering self-compassion, how they could begin to offer self-compassion to themselves. And it's always about the person that you're caring for, and the revelation, so it seemed to the carer participants in my research, was it's like, oh gosh, it's okay to think about me. I have needs as well. And that really kind of sets the ball rolling about starting to take care of themselves in a little bit better, turning that psychological turning inwards towards yourself. And that seems to make all the difference. I don't know whether it's not necessarily about bubble baths and, you know, nice massages. It's like a turning inward. That's how I saw it. I don't know whether you see it like that, Jill, of saying, and I'm in here too. This is hard work, and I'm in here. Also, have you come across that image? Because certainly the carers that I work with, they talked about that you can't pour from an empty jug. That seemed to resonate. You deserve to put something into that jug, because you're going to fall over if you don't carry on looking after yourself to some extent.
Yeah, the other analogy I like is the one where you're in an aircraft and something happens. As a parent, you're told to put the oxygen mask on yourself, because you can't help anybody else if you're struggling to breathe. So that's what you do. You have to have an oxygen mask on. You have to breathe. You have to give yourself the space to breathe. And that's one of the self-compassion tools, is to just notice what's going on with your own breath. And it's just such a simple thing that makes all the difference. And I know in the carer group sessions that we do at Hospice of the Good Shepherd, we just do 2 or 3 minutes of breathing in for 4, a count of 4, holding for about 4 or 5, and then breathing out for longer, and just noticing what happens to you. So that sense of self-care and knowing what's going on inside you, you get a feeling for that if you are doing some of that breathing at points. And it's just one of those things, you know, in caring, there are moments where you can see that you're tetchy or things are getting on top of you. Just we said it before, if you need a cup of tea or whatever, but just sit, and having those breaths makes all the difference, because it just lowers your blood pressure, lowers your breathing rate, and actually gives you that little bit of capacity to be able to see yourself in all this and what's going on. Yeah.
Reduces that reactivity. There might be just that little bit of space to think about how you might respond, as opposed to just going straight into reacting.
Yeah.
You have got a really interesting chapter called Moments of Negotiation, and I found that really spoke to me, of negotiating between the needs of the patient and the carer. For example, when the patient, and I'm calling them patient, but you know, friend, partner, when they don't perhaps want any more treatment and they just want to focus on quality of life, and those around them are really desperate for them to do more. How do you help support that negotiation between kind of carer and the client or the patient or the friend? And where's compassion in that, I suppose?
Okay. I think the compassion is at the center of it all, because in life we have disagreements, we have different values, we have different wants and needs. I guess for me, the patient is at the center. So the loved one who has the illness is at the center of all this. So I would always start with them and ask them, what is it that you really want? What matters most to you? What's most important to you? And there's a scale in my head always of quality of life versus quantity of life. And I don't have a judgment about what people choose. You know, if somebody wants to stay alive for as long as possible, that's great. If somebody wants to have the best quality of life and go quicker, that's fine. There has been some research that says with good palliative care, actually, you can go for quality, but sometimes you get the quantity as well, because you're not doing the harsh medicalized treatments, but you are having your well-being looked after. You're having medicines that help your well-being and quality of life. So it doesn't always have to be either or, but I think having that conversation and knowing what's available for each person, depending on their condition and their illness, and then asking them, okay, so you know what's available, what's important to you? And having the relatives listen and giving the patient that space. And then I would go to the relative and say, so how about you? What about you? What would you like for your relative? What's most important for you as the carer? So getting it from both perspectives, and have the relative listen to that. And then after that, you can start to have a more general two-way conversation about what that brings up. And what's sometimes helpful is if those are polar opposites, what's great to do is to ask the relative why that's important to you. What's behind that? What's the value behind that? Why are you saying you don't want more treatment? What is it? What is it? And then if the carer is saying, well, actually, I really want you to have more treatment. I want you to be around for as long as possible. Why? What is it that's important to that relative? Why? And when you get to the whys, there tends to be a softening of those two polar opposites, and there's a general understanding that can then come together, and there's a bit of a negotiation. It can sometimes be the other way around. It's not always that way around. But I think the key is to start with the patient, the relative who has the illness, then to listen to the carer, and then to try and find common ground between the two of them.
And when you say it could be the other way around, what did you mean by that? That it could be the patient who wants to have every kind of treatment and...
and to live forever. And then the carer finds that difficult because they can see that they're suffering or they're struggling. Or actually that means a lot of responsibility for the carer as the person becomes more poorly. And potentially, it can mean some very debilitating side effects. And that can really worry some carers. Will I be able to cope with, I hope to get explicit, but bodily functions and that sort of thing? Because a lot of the time, we've not done that for our relative, and it's new, and we're thinking, how am I going to feel? Will I fail at the first hurdle when it gets difficult? And none of us know what we're capable of until we're facing it.
No, and I was just thinking about a friend of mine who was caring. Actually, it's turned out, touch wood, so far, it's not life limiting. But when he was recovering from chemo, we talk about bodily functions. It can be really, how can I put this politely? Well, she used to leave the room and then go and be sick outside the house, the back door, because it was so obnoxious what she'd had to deal with. And then, of course, she's trying to cover up her shame at feeling like that, and doesn't want, obviously, the person that she's caring for to see it. It's hard, isn't it? Yeah, really hard.
Can I just add a little bit to that then? Because one of the key things for me as a carer is to recognise what your skills and strengths are.
Right.
And not to be ashamed of that. If you don't do that sort of thing, that's fine. Recognise it and accept it, and find others who have those skills and strengths. So that might be a paid carer, that might be another relative who's got a stronger stomach. It's about understanding what you as an individual can do and feel in your comfort zone with. There will always be times where you feel outside of your comfort zone. And that's okay. But if you can be doing the bulk of the time using your skills and strengths, whatever that is, I know that for me, mine is listening, it's understanding, it's walking alongside, it's being present. My brother's brilliant at DIY. Give me a hammer and nails, I'm useless. So if there's something that needs fixing in the house for my mum, he's the person to call. So it's about knowing what your network is and pooling together what you can do as a family, as friends, as neighbours, as volunteers, people in your community. It's about, they say it takes a village to raise a child. Well, I would argue as well, it takes a village to help somebody have the best possible ending to their life. This is not just a one person thing. It's about hooking into those people around you who can really help and using their skills.
I think that we need to challenge that. Certainly it felt to me as if the carers in my study had this what I deem like a super carer image, that this standard that they had to reach, and that they shouldn't feel cross and tired and bad-tempered and irritable and sad, and that they should be able to do absolutely everything. And I think we are not very good as a society at trying to puncture that image a bit. And I think for me, that was where self-compassion came in, is saying, it's okay to not be perfect. Perfection, I think it's one of my participants actually said to me, this realization is perfection is not required, and that was just a relief. It was just took some of the weight off, not to be this perfect carer.
I love, there's a book called The 4 Agreements, and I love this book because one of the agreements is to do your best. But what that means on a day where you've had time for yourself, things are going well, is very different than a day where you didn't get virtually any sleep the night before, you're feeling poorly yourself, perhaps you've got a toothache, or your health's not brilliant, your relative isn't in the best frame of mind. That best is very different than the best when you're on a really good day. And I think that lets you off the hook. I think perfectionism is a real it's a really difficult concept when you're caring. It's just if you have a good enough day with your loved one, if you have a good enough moment, I think that's why I wrote about moments of meaning. Quite a lot of the caring is really hard, really difficult. But if you can notice those moments where you and your relative connect, have a laugh, things are going wrong, but you still manage to see the funny side of it, or you do something together that is really meaningful for them, like you join them in a hobby. Or I can remember sitting by my dad's bedside in the last few days of his life, and he couldn't communicate other than when I held his hand. He squeezed my hand. And that was enough to keep me going, to carry on the vigil by his bedside. So I think it's about having that awareness that you are going to go through emotional roller coasters. Blimey, you are. I mean, the thought of losing somebody, even before they've gone, is enough to send most people into a spin. And particularly if it's the more close the relationship, the harder it is to think about it and to focus on it. And those emotions will be all over the place. And it's not just one or two. You might be experiencing several in the space of an hour. One of the things I do know as a carer, and I've experienced it many times, is because the person and their condition is getting worse, you can feel a sense of failure. And that's
Can you say a bit more about that, Jill? When you say failure, what do you mean?
Well, I suppose a lot of carers, if you're dealing with somebody who hasn't got a life-limiting illness, then very often they'll have peaks and troughs, and you see them through the peaks and troughs, and you see them out the other side, and you think, aha, great, I've helped them to come through that. There is no come through. You know, you don't have that. You have better days and you have worse days, but generally you will see a decline, and whether that declines over 24 hours or whether that declines over 10 to 15 years, some conditions can last that long, neurological conditions particularly. But if somebody suddenly has a stroke or suddenly has a heart attack and there's no return from that, then that can be really quick and short. But even in that short space, you think, I should be able to do something here. I should be able to make a big difference. But sometimes there is just nothing you can do. All you can do is, if you can, be as present as you can with that person, with them.
And I think that just that being with, sorry, talking across you, Jill.
No, that's all right. It's just that sometimes that's so hard to do, though.
To be with.
Yeah. Because you feel like you should be able to fix it or make it better.
Yeah.
And sometimes you can't, and you just have to witness it. It's being a witness and knowing that you are being present for that person. Even if they're in a coma, if you're having a conversation with them, they will hear your voice, and trusting that they will know you there.
Yeah, and that's obviously resonated very deeply with you, that the importance of being with, and the pain of not being able to solve a life-limiting illness and symptoms, and how difficult that is to witness. You have a chapter called Moments of Planning. Have you got any top tips for planning for end-of-life care?
I think, first of all, it's worth recognising whether you are a planner or a fly by the seat of your pants type of person. And I think, again, it's a spectrum. We're all on that spectrum. I tend to be a planner because if I have a plan or some options, I can then have a bit of flexibility. So planning for the future, I believe, allows you to live the best possible life you can, because when you're caring for somebody, things can change quite rapidly. So, for example, the sorts of things that in the hospice we talk about in planning for the future, getting your finances in order, wills, lasting power of attorney, so that if your relative becomes incapacitated, you can actually have that conversation with medics or with other relatives in terms
But
of...
do you find that's a challenge, Jill, in the sense that some people don't want to look at preparing a will or a power of attorney because of what it seems to represent to them, and that it's going to bring death nearer?
Yeah, that's a very common issue, very common issue. So I've got 2 tips there, okay? One is that none of us are going to live forever, so why not do this together? So when my husband was diagnosed with cancer in 2018, we did our lasting powers of attorney together. We revisited our wills, and we talked about what was important to both of us, so that he knew what I wanted and I knew what he wanted. So I think doing that together is a really positive way of approaching it. And the second thing is, you will have opportunities in daily life. There'll be things on the TV, things on the radio, things that other people are choosing to do. For example, when preferred priorities of care and future wishes, you know, knowing the individual and what's really important to them, you can have that conversation and write it down, make a note of it. So it's not just you that knows that, but it's lots of other people. So if they go from one care setting to another, you can then have that conversation. There is a limit to this, though. If your relative does not want to talk about this stuff, it's very difficult. My dad would never talk about his funeral arrangements, and we had to guess. We did the best we could. We had him at the centre of our thoughts all the time, and we read a poem that he had written. You know, we had music in the church that we knew he liked. When we were talking afterwards, I mean, Christine will know this, his sense of humour was always, you know, a bit dicey. He used to say stupid puns and stupid jokes, but that was at the heart of him. So, and he used to compile crosswords. So I think we do our best to have these conversations, but if we can't, we do our best to put ourselves in that person's shoes and have them at the centre of our thoughts in whatever planning we make. But it can make such a difference. You know, for example, I can't drink ordinary tea or coffee because I get headaches. So if I was in a care home and nobody knew that, I'd be like a wailing banshee. You know, it's these things about you that make you you that make it so important. And there's a really useful tool online. So the End of Life Partnership in Cheshire have a page which has a section all about me, and you can actually write down and use it as a legacy about anything and everything about yourself. So it has information about the wills and power of attorney and that sort of thing, but you can write about what's been the most important lesson you've learned in your life, about your pets, who are your favourite pets, you know, about the favourite holidays you've had. And sometimes there are things in there that you can write about and capture or even record, that you can then use and keep as a relative and a loved one to pass on to generations. So, you know, if you've got a youngster in the family who knew their perhaps grandparent, you can revisit that and remember them in fondness and as they.
So what you're saying is, see if you can open the conversation, see if you can invite a discussion, but it very much depends on the individual concerned. And if they don't want to go there, then you have to just accept that, but you do the best that you can. And you talked about, oh gosh, you just, what was the metaphor that you used? I can't remember, I've forgotten. But I was also thinking about that sense of, we all have insurance for the car or the house, don't we? We don't anticipate that we are going to have the house burnt down, but we're prepared just in case. And I think for me, that's what it is about having a will written and put away. I'm not bringing my death any nearer. I'm just prepared just in case that it's there for others, and we've got some of the finances sorted. But like you know, you've been telling me for ages to get my power of attorney done, and I still haven't done it, you know. So it's so much better to do it now when it's not an issue than
I think that's the key, Kate.
it's suddenly becomes a very emotive topic.
I think when somebody is towards the end of their life, it can be more difficult to talk about these things. So I would encourage anybody and everybody to start to have these conversations if you can. I mean, it's not easy, but you can start with the nice things. You know, start with what recipe would you hand on to your children or your grandchildren or your, you know, your whoever it is that means something to you. What would you like people to know about you? You know, I used to wear stripy leggings and have really weird haircuts as a student. You know, and I, I can see Christine laughing. You know, it's that sort of thing that makes you who you are. And very often, because your children went around when you were that age, it's great to share that. You know, some of the, you could have a memory box. I know that End of Life Partnership do creative sessions where you create your own memory box and you put in there what you would like to pass on. And it's that sort of thing that can be fun, creative. You can do it as a family activity, you know. If you have got children and grandchildren, you can do that together and they can make their own at the same time. And I mean, photographs are brilliant for that sort of thing. I have a Wallace and Gromit tie from my dad that I treasure because it's something that was so personal to him. Yeah.
Great, thank you. Well, you, of course, one of the chapters that has spoke particularly to me was about moments of compassion. So what do you suggest to those supporting someone who has a life-limiting illness? I think you've already touched on this earlier, but can you just kind of remind us again about what compassion might look like for the person who's the supporter, the carer, the family member? Where does compassion come in for both sides?
So I think for the family member, it's about understanding as a carer what makes you unique as an individual, what matters to you. And that's different for each one of us. I did some work as a careers guidance consultant, and that was brilliant because it gave me a chance to help people understand what mattered to them in the world of work. But I think it's also important to know what matters to you outside of work and who you are as an individual, as a human being. So for me, it's, you know, if I got COVID over Christmas and I wasn't allowed to go out. And how I sort my thoughts out is to go out and walk. So being cooped up inside was just horrendous. So it's about knowing the little things that you do for yourself, which continue to remind you that you are you. That might be something creative. It might be, you know, having a cheeky gin and tonic. It might be having a phone call with a friend. I mean, I know some of my friends have joined here today. And in the quote, you know, in Moments of Meaning, it's a meaningful friend. And I get such a lot from walking with friends, talking with friends, listening. And being.
I just want to comment on something, Jill. You just said, remind you, I think, of who you really are. So that is about helping you to see that you are not just carer or you're, right, okay.
And I would encourage people to keep other parts of their lives to some degree. I know it can be really difficult, you know, if you're somebody who's caring for somebody who has a neurological illness and, you know, you are the person that needs to be there for them 24 hours a day. That's so difficult. But I would still encourage you to think about how you can try and get a support network so you get time off. And if you don't get time off, the difficulty is you could start to decline in your own health and become more. And you can perhaps do that for a short amount of time, but you can't do it for a longer length of time. You have to have some breaks where you can remember who you are as an individual.
And that's what the research shows, Jill, doesn't it? You know, that the carers, and when I'm talking about carers, I'm carers of those looking after somebody with a life-limiting illness. You know, the levels of depression, anxiety, stress are way above you know, the normal range. So it's so often that carers themselves are really struggling too with their role.
Can I ask you, Kate, because you obviously had eye care and you did some research with carers, what did you know were the things that made the difference to them?
Well, it was interesting. So just to explain, I suppose, for those who don't know, I had two parts of the research. One was to delivering eye care, which is like a 4-module self-compassion intervention. Very short, no more than about an hour. So I delivered it to carers on a one-to-one basis, and then I took it online. And I've completely forgotten what I was going to say to you. What did you say? What did you ask me, Jill?
What made the difference?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's what I was going to say. Thank you. So here am I using a lot of self-compassion practice in my own life because they supported me in my role. So I really wanted the carers, not a very good researcher here because I was maybe having a little bit of self-interest. I was expecting the carers to really get value out of maybe the guided meditations, some of the particular self-compassion practices that are quite tailored. And it wasn't those at all, really, that the carers took away. I mean, some used, say, the body scan to help them get to sleep at night, and maybe they would sit down and do a 10-minute meditate. But what really, I think, was the turning point for all of them, whether they did it online or whether they did it face to face, was a sense of I matter. The mere fact that I wanted to research them was for a start kind of like, can't believe you're interested in me. Yeah. So that sense of I matter, and a recognition that it was okay to have needs. Yeah. And the pivotal 2 practices, I think, for carers was, you talked about a 2 to 3 minute meditation that you lead in your carers group. Mine participants really valued a breath, a pause, 2 to 3 breaths. So I remember one participant saying, you know, I'm standing at the sink, and if he asks me again to pick up something that he's dropped, I'm going to scream because I want to finish the washing up. And she said it was just taking a breath to know that, okay, to find a little bit of patience. And the other one is the question, and it's kind of like a 2-part question. What do I really need right now? What do I really need right now? What is it I need? Or what's the kind of thing that I can do for myself? And it's asking that question. And it may be that the answer is, you know what, I need to go outside and just scream, or I need a bar of chocolate, or I need a coffee, or I need to speak to a friend, or I need to play some music. But it's that turning inwards. What is it? And those were the things that really made the difference. I think that whole structure of a self-compassion program was really helpful, but the takeaways seem to be those 2 kind of small things.
I think I totally understand why, because when you're in the thick of caring, it needs to be really simple. And you need to be able to remember it. And sticking something on the fridge or the door or whatever, pause, breathe. Or you can have routines like when you clean your teeth or when you put the kettle on. That's when you do the it's linking it with another activity.
It's not the big stuff, is it? It's not the big practices. They can be helpful from time to time, but on a day-to-day level,
And it's not
so
I'm just kind of, it's not always possible, is it, Kate, either? Because if you are in the thick of it, you don't want to take time out for big things. It just needs to be small things. I would add one thing, and that's that if there are any medical professionals out there or social workers who are listening tonight, the one thing that you can do there's 2 things actually, is one, if you get the chance, ask the carer how they're doing.
Yes.
And the second thing is, encourage them, say thank you, and say, well done, you're doing a brilliant job. Because
Oh,
I can remember being on my knees, looking after my mother-in-law. There were so many professionals coming in and out trying to help her. And we were on a rota. Myself, my husband and a family friend were on a constant rota to try and give ourselves a break. And they came in, they went out, and they focused on her. But actually, we were doing our best. And it would just take a minute for them to say, and how are you doing? You're doing brilliantly. You're still at home, you're caring for her, you're providing for all her needs. And we were working as a team with the district nurses as well. They were fantastic. With the Macmillan nurse was fantastic. The GP was fantastic. But at the end of the day, we were a team, and it really does help if somebody says, thank you, you're doing a brilliant job.
Yeah.
Simple, but it really makes a difference.
I'd echo that. Yeah. So I'm aware of the time, Jill. So final question for you. So if I was talking to that 40-year-old self right at the very beginning, given all that you know now and all your experience, what would you like her to know? If you could go back, what would you tell that 40-year-old Jill?
It's that you're doing a great job. And it's, I think the other thing was, I noticed that a lot of people really struggle with this, and some can't do this, and that's fine, because for them it's something else that they can do and offer the world and all the rest of it. But I noticed that I felt, even though it was difficult and the roller coaster of emotions and all the rest of it, I noticed that even if I put my foot in it and said the wrong thing, which you constantly do when you're caring for a relative, because you've got that friction of the normal relationship and then the changes that are happening to them, the changes that are happening to you because you're taking on more responsibility. I think it's just recognizing that I had a capacity at that moment in time to just be present. And I know that you recommended doing the soul midwifery training, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. There was lots in it, but the crux of it is just to be present. And if you can, that is the one single thing that your relative will most value. The fact that you're staying the course, you're not disappearing off, you're not, they're out and about, you're not walking on the other side of the street and avoiding them. That goes for friends, relatives, neighbours. If you can be a witness and be aware and just be present, even if you don't have a clue what to say, it doesn't matter. Smile. Lovely to see you. How are you doing?
Thank you, Jill.
Just that presence is the most important thing.
Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. That was such a moving, helpful, in many ways, brave, courageous, and compassionate salon. I enjoyed it so much, and I honestly could sit and listen to you for another few hours. So I just want to say thank you for your honesty and your bravery, and you two are really quite awesome. So thank you, and everything that you have to say, it just really moved me. So thank you. And as I was thinking about self-care, and I sort of would like to read a poem for you now while we're waiting for questions. Would that be all right? That was just making me think. Whilst you were talking, I just wanted to applaud both of you, and you've really honoured us being here at the salon tonight. So thank you. So everyone that's listening in, I'm sure you will have lots to say and questions to ask. So please feel free to write in the chat. I'm trying not to get too emotional. I'm sure it wasn't the gin and tonic, Jill.
I knew you'd noticed that bit.
Thanks though for outing me. Okay, so let me just read this poem to you while we wait for questions. The Peace of Wild Things by Wendell Berry. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night, the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things, who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting for their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free. So thank you, Kate and Jill, very much. I also actually want to mark the fact that Eva Musby is here this evening, and she's sort of a bit of a celebrity in my house. So thank you, Eva. Eva works in anorexia and eating disorders, and she is, well, you know, does such amazing things for kids and young people in terms of bringing compassion into that world. So thank you, Eva, for being here as well. I'm blessed that you're here. So please feel free to ask questions in the chat. You don't have to speak them out unless you want to. I can read them. I think that, and some people are saying thank you. So that's Sarah. Such an important and lovely discussion. It was a lovely discussion, and can be such a tricky thing that I know that we should be talking about. I think I can see Robert typing, but maybe he's just emailing people. No. Oh, here we are. We have a question from Holly. Marty, you can ask the question. Holly, I want to ask how to deal with the situation of those you're caring for if their illness makes them angry or aggressive.
Yeah, that's a really tough one, particularly if it's a different trait than you've had in your relationship and it's changed. I think all I can say is, if you are in pain, like if you've got toothache, you know that your own level of being able to deal with life just is reduced. So I think that really helps to have compassion for the other person, because they wouldn't be doing that unless they were struggling. However, you still need to have self-compassion. And if you need to do as much as you can to have short breaks regularly, and it's back to what Kate was saying, it's that deep breath, take time out, even if it's just 3 or 4 minutes. The other thing I would say is get help. Just get as much help as you possibly can. If you have the money to pay, get somebody in to help with care. If you know that they're less angry with other people and it's just you that's triggering it, then try and get those people to come in and help out as regularly as possible. I don't know, what do you think, Kate?
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I was thinking also maybe of the grief that you might have if there's a complete change in personality. And you know, I would say this, but depending on what the diagnosis is, you know, maybe your local hospice could offer a counselling service. It's getting support for yourself, because I think if there's you're grieving already the person that you've lost. If there's been such a dramatic change in personality, or if you're, it depends whether there's a change in personality or whether you're just the one that they feel safe to vent at, because they're underneath the anger is they're desperately sad themselves at what's happening. So I just echo what you said, Jill. Taking care of yourself, getting as much support as you can, thinking outside the box of maybe, yes, are there other people who they're less reactive with, that perhaps could share some of the caring load, I suppose. Yeah.
The other thing to bear in mind as well is that in hospices there are very often social workers, and the ones I've met and worked with have been just brilliant, and they will know what's going on in the local area, and there may be things that you can tap into that would help both you and your relative.
What about, Jill, carers organisation, so that you can actually speak to another carer who maybe understand and can also perhaps share some tips and ideas. I know when my mum was she'd got dementia as well as heart failure when she was dying, but my mum developed a kind of a drinking problem, and it was I mean, we had to laugh, because when you're looking on it was hysterical, really, because she'd be tottering down at 90 odd to the local co-op and buying a couple of bottles of wine and then necking them, and then she was completely off her legs. And it was only, and we didn't know what to do, because none of us lived next door to her. And it was only by going on a carers forum, a dementia carers forum, that I picked up the idea of somebody said about watering down the alcohol in the house and putting lemonade in the bottles instead of, and just leaving a tiny bit of alcohol. And that was, oh my gosh, that made all the difference. And we gradually managed to wean her off. Now, I wouldn't have picked that up if I hadn't spoken to another carer. So maybe, maybe a carers group or online carers group might be helpful as well.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from the work I do at the hospice with my colleague Sue, we run carers groups, and the most important thing for carers is to be able to look into the eyes of another carer and know that they're having similar issues. So we have a saying, which is share, don't compare. So be honest about what's going on for you, and the other person can be honest with you about what's going on for them, but don't compare, because your situations will probably be very different. The other thing is, if it's something to do with dementia, there are Admiral nurses. And I know we've got one here with us tonight, Sarah, a good friend of mine who works for the Anti-Life Partnership in Cheshire. That knowledge that they hold, they've talked to lots of different carers. So if you can find an Admiral nurse in your area, then you can talk to them about what you can do. But you're right, Kate, it's those also who are living and breathing this on a daily basis. If you can get in touch on online forums, Carers UK, we have Cheshire and Warrington carers here that provide so much support. It is looking at what's available in your local area. Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much. So we have a number of questions. I'm going to ask Robert, actually, who's happy to ask his question. I'm just going to see if I can find him and unmute him. This is too much power I've got to mute and unmute people, really. Where are you, Robert? I can't see you now. Oh, there you are. There you are. Ask to unmute.
Mute.
That's you.
Can I be heard?
Yes, you can. I can hear you.
My question's for Jill, and it's not a very well-formed question, but you've navigated the agreements between yourself and the person being cared for. How do you deal with third parties, friends, other people who care, who come in and who are determined not to hide from the issues and almost relentlessly face them, but are constantly putting their feet in it? And both the carer and the person being cared for are too polite to tell them to ease off. How would you approach that? Because they're well-meaning, they don't mean harm, but it's just missing the mark.
Yeah, I guess if the carer is confident enough, they can approach them themselves. But if they're not, maybe there's somebody in their network that knows this other person. It does help to have it written down. So if you've got an agreement and it's written down, you can say, this is what we've agreed. What do you think of this? I have to say, though, you can try, but they might not take the message. So you can try yourself as a carer. The person who has the illness can try. Actually, very often, if it comes from the person with the illness, it has far more power. Yeah. But at the same time, if they continue to ignore that, It is very difficult. I can remember as my mother-in-law got more and more poorly, she got less able to cope with people just being in her vicinity. And it might be that you communicate not what they're doing and what they're saying, but just to try and limit how often they're coming and how often they're interacting, and just say, well, they're really tired today. Could we keep it to 5 minutes? And let's face it, I've been doing this since my dad died when I was 40. I'm now 55. I still put my foot in it. I still say things that really I shouldn't say. But at the end of the day, if you can see that the person's heart is in the right place and they're really trying to help, there is an element of compassion and forgiveness for that other person as well. That's quite a rambling answer, but there's lots of elements to this, I think, and it depends why they're doing it. And it might just be awkwardness. And you've got to work out, is it worth having them in your space for what they give you and forgiving their or can you reduce it? Or actually, you do have the right of saying, I just don't want you visiting anymore. Because sometimes it can be too painful.
Thank you. Thanks, Jen. Thank you for the question, Robert. I have a question here now from Denise, which is really about self-compassion. How can we cope with feelings of guilt or thoughts of I'm not good enough when caring for a loved one?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know whether you want to say something, Kate. These feelings are just so common because you've obviously you've had your counselling experience. Do you want to say more about that?
I think what do I want to say about that? I think that comes with part of this package of thinking that you have to be this all things to all people, and that this an unrealistically high standard that you set yourself. So self-compassion would say is, you're not perfect, you're human, and you can only do the best that you can. And depending on, just as Jill said, a while ago, some days are going to be better than others. I know for me, there's a practice in the mindful self-compassion world called, what do they call it? I used to call it something about equanimity. Can't remember. But it was absolutely targeted at carers, and this was the one that made such a huge difference to me when I was really struggling, and when I still struggle, because right now I'm a carer, and it's really hard at times. And this practice says something along the lines of, everybody is on their own journey. You can help to the extent that you can, but you cannot take away their problems or their suffering. So you can only do what you can do. And I think for me, that gives me permission not to get it right, and to know that I'm doing the best that I can, and that has to be good enough right now.
I think there's just one thing I'd add to that, Kate. I don't know whether you'd agree. Guilt is part of the course with this.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
It's normal. Yeah. It's natural. You will feel guilty.
Because isn't it, depending on the relationship, Jill, doesn't it depend on, our role is to just make things better. We want to make it better. We want to problem solve it. And some things we can't problem solve. We can't make it better. That causes me a lot of pain, I know, me personally, but and I don't know whether this resonates with Denise, but in my rush to want to try and problem solve, I forget to be with. And you just said, Jill, about the importance of being with and listening and witnessing, and I'm rushing on to try and problem solve because it's too painful to sit and be with. And I have to remember, actually, that is often the greatest gift that I can give, is to be with, rather than try and take the pain away, which I can't.
I think that's something we talk about in the carers groups as well, is that if you try and solve the problem for somebody else, it's not giving them their independence and their freedom to choose how to work on it themselves. and we might have the answer that we would have, but it might not be their answer. So just being with somebody, listening, understanding from their perspective, because actually, if it was an easy answer, they would have solved it already. They would have done it already. So just listening, being with. There is a new book. Some of you may have heard of Catherine Mannix. I went to see her recently in Keswick. She was doing a talk about her new book. And for anybody who is in the medical profession or social work or any caring profession, it's a way of having conversations, but starting with the individual and listening, rather than immediately going into problem solving mode. Because actually, as I said, if it was an easy problem to solve, they would have done it already.
I just think I would add on, though, it does depend on maybe the person that you're supporting. If they're very weak or just totally overwhelmed by their illness, they can't necessarily problem solve. So I guess it's also about being very tentative with any suggestions. Do you think this might possibly be a way that we could? What do you think about this? That's certainly what my experience is caring for my son, is that I'm offering suggestions, and I'm trying to be more tentative about it and saying the power's with you to decide what you want to do, but he hasn't got the energy to actually find the solutions himself.
I think this is where information can be so helpful, because if you know what the options are, that helps, because you can then choose yourself from the options. So the more you know about this arena and can have those conversations, and you know the options, and that's including, you know, if you're talking to medics, what are the options for me here? You don't have to have the answers, you just need to know the options and then have a conversation about what option you want to choose. I think somebody was asking about the book again. It's called Listen.
I think Holly's put it in. See, that woman's a magician. She's got it already. Link and everything. That's brilliant. Thanks, Holly. Thanks, Jill. Thanks, Kate. We've got a question here from Kim. This is interesting because it sort of comes back to this whole guilt discussion as well. Any tips for dealing with other people's expectations or perceived expectations in a compassionate way? Family and friends should take the brunt of the care rather than getting professional carers.
Yeah, I mean, I had a friend from a community which expects families to take care of their own. And it was so difficult for her to choose not to do that, and to actually for their relative to go into a care home, because there was so much judgment around that. It's so difficult. It is really difficult. I think knowing the options and knowing your relative and having open and honest discussions about why that option has been chosen can then help other people to understand why you've chosen that option. So I'll get into a bit of personal stuff here. My mum has asked to go in a care home, and I'm fine with that. And we've picked out the care home that she would like to go into together. And that's because she lives in a different location. And it would be quite difficult for me to provide the care that she might need if that gets to that point. So I can have an honest and open discussion with anybody because we've already discussed it between ourselves and we're clear about why. But at the end of the day, if you and your relative decided that's the best thing all round, you know, people can have their opinions, but actually what matters most is the person who is dying and their closest, nearest and dearest. Kate Gross talks about this in her book, and it's a spiral of care. And you start with the patient at the centre, and then their next of kin, and then other relatives or close friends, neighbours, community in the wide, and where is that person on that spiral? Are they at the center, or are they further out from the center? And actually what counts is the patient, the next 1 or 2 levels. That's what matters the most. But I think if you can compassionately explain why you have made those decisions, then hopefully they will understand. And if they don't, it's their choice.
Thanks, Jill. Something to be said as well for compassionate boundaries. Hannah. So, okay, Hannah, I was a carer for a friend and had a breakdown due to the complexities and disregard for my own health conditions and the shame and guilt I have, but also anger does linger now and then. I've always been the carer in my family informally, and despite knowing how unhealthy this is, how do you step away before hitting crisis when your role to close people in your life has always been the one to care? This sounds very familiar, and I'm glad I started before I even read it by saying compassionate boundaries, but I'll hand it over to Jill and Kate.
It's interesting that in families we do have roles, don't we? As I was describing before, my brother's DIY, you know, I'm probably the caring one, because you can care in lots of different ways. And my sister, she's brilliant at negotiating deals, managing things. So, for example, my mum's boiler needed replacing, so she went and stayed with mum while she had her boiler replaced. I couldn't do that. Well, I could, but I'd probably make a mess of it. I think we do get pigeonholed and pushed down a certain avenue. And that's okay if we're comfortable and confident with it, but we're not always comfortable and confident with the pigeonhole we're being put in or the road we're being driven down. How do you avoid getting to the point of breakdown? It's so difficult. I think what Kate was talking about before, of the self-compassion and just having that little voice that says, do you know what, I'm at it too.
What do I need? What do I need? And asking that question, you know, what's the kindest thing that I can do for myself? Not forgetting yourself in it.
And I had a conversation with a relative recently about one of the most difficult things is when a relative isn't helping themselves, and yet they expect you to pull all the punches and do all the hard lifting. And sometimes these boundaries, you have to be quite strong as a carer and say, do you know what? I'm doing the best I can. I can't do any more. In fact, I actually need to do less. I need to pull away. I can remember when I was looking after my husband when he was going through cancer treatment, and he accused me of being like his mum rather than his wife. And that was because I got into that mode of thinking it was all my responsibility to sort him out. And that was a really wise choice of language for him to use with me, because I suddenly thought, you know what, I don't want to be his mum. I want to be his wife, and I do want to care, but actually I need to pull back. But the other thing is, if you have had that experience and you want to try and unpack it, Kate was talking about counselling, and I would recommend to anybody who has got that legacy from a caring experience to look at your local hospice and to see if there is a bereavement counselling service, because they are brilliant. Sue, who I deliver the carer group sessions with, she's just brilliant. You know, she will help you unpack what it is that's happened and really analyze what's gone on, explore your emotions about it, and hopefully come to a level of resolution that at the time you were doing your best, it was good enough. In fact, it was fantastic. And you know, the counsellors have tools, techniques, that process of listening and coming to terms with what happened, to a point of where potentially it shifts in your own health and well-being and how you relate to it. I don't know whether you want to add to that, Kate, because I know you've done a lot of counselling, grief counselling.
I think perhaps I would maybe just add that maybe counselling might help you to explore where the need to be the carer in the family has arisen from. You know, is it a long-standing, really from a young person, as a young child, that you've become the family carer, and that an awareness that that role doesn't suit you anymore, and you don't need to assume it, and you can let it go, and I would perhaps be able to help you explore that and let that role go. I think I'd echo Marty, and compassionate boundaries as well, knowing where you can care and when you have to care for yourself, and actually right now that might matter more than doing any more caring. Yeah.
Thank you, Jill and Kate. There's something about wiseness in compassion, isn't there? That ability to see your own suffering and knowing what to how to help yourself with that. You know, and that courage as well.
Yes, because Marty, isn't there something about Kristen Neff talks about fierce compassion? Actually, sometimes the compassionate thing to do is to say no, enough, no more. It's not always about being very giving and understanding and empathic. Sometimes there's the strength there, and that's that wisdom to say no, no more.
Yes, and step out.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think that's about stepping out of the empathy, because sometimes we can be too firmly in someone else's shoes, and then you can't even help then because you're too in the shoes. Sometimes you have to enfold that empathy with compassion by removing yourself from the shoes, because otherwise you can't help. You have to step back from empathy. I think, and it's so tricky, isn't it? Because we all have this capacity of humans to feel guilty and feel that we should be doing better and we should be doing more and that we're being judged, and we really give ourselves a hard time.
And sometimes the most empathic thing is to walk away. Because if there's that tension and that difficulty, you know, you can't be all things to all people. And sometimes it is about that it is fierce compassion. It's about saying, okay, the best thing in this situation is perhaps for me to walk away.
Yeah, definitely. So thank you so much, Kate and Jill. I don't know if there's anything like you'd like to end with or anything you'd like to say. I'd certainly like to say thank you again and again and again. And I'd also like to say thank you again and again and again to Holly, who is our fierce companion somewhere in the background. And she's just been awesome getting all these books straight away into the chat, etc., etc. And thank you to all the Salonistas, new and existing. And I do really, really hope some of you will join us again, because it's been lovely to see so many new faces and friends of Kate and Jill. And I can tell how much you are held in such regard, Jill and Kate. So it's so very lovely to see that. So thank you so very much. And please, Kate and Jill, spend some time looking in the chat at people that are saying thank you, because it's so nice to isn't it, to be appreciated. We will save, in fact I'll do it now, we'll save the chat so that we can put it as part of the recording. And please look at the Twitter feed, because that's the other thing that Amazing Holly has been doing, has been tweeting away at a furious rate in social media. So all sorts of things will be happening in there, and the YouTube recording, and I definitely did record it, will be up in the next couple of days, and we'll send that to you, Jill and Kate. So thank you very much. I don't know if you'd like to close, to say, the last person to say goodbye, Jill.
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you to my meaningful friends for being with me tonight. It means such a lot, because I don't know whether I'm speaking for Kate as well, but I was certainly nervous about coming online tonight. It's the first thing I've done like this, and just hearing the emails and texts that I've had from people, and knowing I can see a couple of smiley faces there. I'm just really, really thrilled that you've come along. And I apologise if I talk about this stuff too much. But you know it means so much to me, and friends are there you know, when you need them most. So I just wanted to say a really big thank you to those of you who've joined us who are friends.
Oh, it's so lovely. Thanks, Jill. And thanks, Kate. Do you want to do your thank yous too? I feel like we're giving you an Oscar now or something.
No, it's just been a real pleasure, and I'm so proud of Jill, and wonderful work that you do, Jill. Yeah.
Both of you. Now you're going to have us crying, so we all need to go now and regroup.
Get that gin.
Yes. Thank you so much, ladies, and thank you so much for everyone tonight. Take care and thank you.
Thank you.